Welcome to Broadcast Map, the show that covers the world of broadcasting, the Canadian media landscape, sports media, the show's favorite sports teams, as well as news and politics. Here's your host, Ali Musa.
Good afternoon. Today is Monday, we are at July 21st, 2025. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you have had an excellent weekend. Well, I'm excited to chat some NHL here, as I am joined by historian Liam Maguire. Liam, first of all, I want to take this opportunity to thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. I appreciate your time.
Pleasure to be here, Ali. Looking forward to it, and great to connect, my friend.
Absolutely, same here. Absolutely. Now we're going to start with some current stuff in some current NHL, a little bit of some current NHL stuff that has been sort of taking place. Starting with Mitch Marner. Were you sort of surprised that he ended up in Vegas?
Well, Vegas, I think in the last 72 or 96 hours, they emerged as a front runner, and now, as we know, that was the case. There were so many teams mentioned a couple of weeks leading up to it. You couldn't help but go on social media and see 3 or 4 different names. I think that various teams, whether it be Chicago or Anaheim, San Jose. I mean, there were teams that I think maybe people were just throwing against the wall. Maybe there were some that did have some insight. Maybe there was some legit tire kicking. At the end of the day, I think Vegas is a great fit for him. They've got the one cup, and they've been a contender just about every year that they've been in their short tenure in the NHL. And adding Mitch to their depth, if they've got all hands on deck, will make them very formidable come playoff time, despite his record not being the best in Toronto. I think a new lease on life in Vegas is the best thing for him and his family, and I expect him to have a very good season in Vegas. So I wasn't, Ali, for me personally, when these things are going down and a big name is going to move, I just don't go to bed at night just like really with a lot of angst over where they're going to go. It's like when the deal's done and they move, then I'll go, okay, well, I'll assess it now because it's actually happened. Prior to that, to be honest with you, pal, I don't invest a lot of energy in really worrying about it or really too overly discussing it. And I think at the end of the day, it's just a great move for Mitch Marner.
And the Leafs got, and I mean, I think the Leafs also got, a good sort of fit in return as well. They got, I believe they got Nick Waugh, I believe they got in return, and then I think that's a good fit as well.
Well, he's a warm body. He's an NHL guy. He's a 30, 40 point guy. I mean, you're giving up 100 points. It's a body back. If there was anything that was surprising is that Marner even agreed at all to a sign and trade. But I guess maybe to make the deal, Vegas had to give somebody up. And, they've made some other trades with it. We know how they skirt around the cap come playoff time. They're one of the teams that have stolen a page from Tampa and others. But at the end of the day, Nick Roy, the Toronto Maple Leafs are still a very good hockey club. Like they could, if Matthews can regain some, if not all of his form, and have something close to what we're used to from him, if everything else is relatively equal, they'll be a very formidable team in the Atlantic. There's no doubt about it. And their challenges in the Matthew era are always going to remain what happens in the postseason. So they've got a good club, even picking up Dakota Joshua there from Vancouver. It's a nice pickup. It's a nice depth pickup. He's a guy that's going to go right away into your lineup. They've got a lot of guys that maybe some of these guys will steal a page from Knives, that should be the new direction that the Leafs go in, is with Matthew Knives and the core four. You got another year on Johnny T, and look, he played okay last year. You can't take away anything from his effort, but it's just so friggin' hard come postseason to match what you do in the regular season statistically. And they're always going to be huge question marks as long as Austin's wearing the C, and what do they do in the postseason? So it's they're an enigma because of their popularity and because of the nature of the Shanna plan and the Dubas era. Such an epic fail. And now what can they do to try and work around that?
And, of course, both of those eras are now over.
Yeah, Channy's gone. Dubas is gone. But the remnants remain. And, for the rest of the time that Austin's on the team, it's going to be called the Austin Matthews era. And he got his money. They got their money because Dubas overpaid everybody out of the gate. And he got screwed. He did get screwed over because of the flat cap. Let's be honest. I don't think he's a stupid man. He bases. He's part of the new regime where analytics drive the show, and he's not a guy that played. This isn't a Jim Rutherford. Like he's a. But I still think the guy knows hockey, but he got screwed by that flat cap, and they were unable to make any other moves in that era there when they probably had the cap been going up like it is now. Maybe you could retool a little bit and get the help that the guys needed for the postseason after. Really, the one to me was losing to Montreal in 2021. The core four needed to be blown up the next year. You can't roll that back after that loss. That's the worst series loss in Toronto Maple Leaf history. Not game. That would be the Game 7 against Boston with 4-1 lead, 10:22 to go. But series, that, in my opinion, that's the worst series loss that the Leafs have ever suffered. Up 3-1 on Montreal. In a Canadian division, in a COVID year, 56 games, that was tailor-made for Toronto to go minimally to the semifinals. And they crashed and burned again, and you roll back with essentially the same group. Can't do it, man. Cannot do it, and they did, and here we are.
Yeah, I think and it'll be interesting, and of course they just also traded Ryan Reeves as well. So I think they're starting to make some incremental changes where they can.
Yeah, I don't, Ryan Reeves, what was he going to play this year? The funny thing is, even some of those shifts that he did get out on the ice, he played a lot of effective singular shifts or games of hockey when he was able to get in the lineup. But like he's a guy, if he is in your lineup and whatever he's going to show that he has left here at his age, you got to platoon him anyway. You can't play him a regular shift. You shouldn't. You can't play him every game. You could, but you shouldn't. And I do think, though, that some of what he brought is an element that will need to be replaced. Not so much the fighting, but a little bit, but not so much that. But my God, you'd have to be living under a rock not to see what Florida's done in the last 3 years. And frankly, if you turn the clock back for 3 years before when Tampa was doing it, and with Goudreau and Gourde, and it's these guys that on the third line that are every bit as important as your guys who have to score for you in the postseason, as well as your goaltending, your D, like all the elements. But if you don't have any physicality, you're going to get run out of Dodge. This is what happens at Carolina every year. They've got the prettiest team in the league. They do a nice little dance after every game and duck, duck, goose and all the rest. I don't know if they're still doing it or not, but, they're just a pretty team. Like, there's no grit. They're never going to win a cup unless they start to make some changes to the lineup that's going to really have an impact come the postseason. You know what's gone on, Ali, with Toronto's failures is combined with what we've seen in the NHL in the last 6, 8, 9 years or so, is it's really highlighted how you have to be in the postseason, how you have to have physical elements still even in 2025. Yeah, the Broad Street era is long done, man. That's 50 years ago. But you still need that. If you can't see what Florida does to teams, then you're blind, ignorant, or or you just don't want to admit that your team has no shot come playoff time, despite the fact you can roll into the playoffs relatively easily.
Well, there you go. And I think Florida, and I still feel they have a couple of years left in them as a contending team.
What hockey person thought they were going to get those three guys signed? Nobody thought that, other than Zito. When he said it right on the ice as the team was celebrating the Stanley Cup. And he was asked, I don't know if it was Hockey Night in Canada or TNT guys, but he was asked, so what do you think the odds are? Oh, yeah, I think we can get them all signed. We'll get all three of them signed. And nobody believed that. Like Ekblad, I had him on the first train out of town going somewhere for big dough. And Bennett, I thought, well, I don't know, man. He won the Conn Smythe. They won 2 cups in a row. I thought maybe it was a better chance. Plus, you'd want to bring him back. Maybe you could say Ekblad was of the three. Well, Marchand really probably the most expendable, maybe because of his age and depending on what contract he wanted. They get all three of them signed. Yes, Ali, my God. Right now, July 21st, you announced the date of the show at the start of the show here. Right now, July 21st, 2025, the Florida Panthers are overwhelming favorites to three-peat here. No question.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy, isn't it?
Well, we haven't had a three-peat since the Islanders, and that's over 40 years ago. So it's had some teams here when all of a sudden looked like nobody could ever win 2 in a row again, and then all of a sudden, in the last 10 years, a few have bounced it out. So it is doable, and teams are finding a way to stay a little bit more at the top of the Ferris wheel there before you roll back down and have to regroup and retool and rebuild and all the rest. But this hasn't happened overnight. It's been a build because this Florida team, if you turn the clock back, at one point missed the playoffs 10 straight years. Nobody was talking about the no state tax then. They missed the playoffs 10 years in a row, Ali. You know that.
Yeah.
And, Tampa missed them 6 out of 7 years. So you get in quality hockey people like Julian Brisebois and Bill Zito are, and they surround themselves with quality hockey people, assistant GMs and capologists and scouts and assistant coaches and all the rest. And you can build a team that can challenge and maybe even win. And that's what they've done. So, at this point right now, it's not a surprise. But I think when they came up, the thing about Tampa is, well, they had that run, you had the run with St. Louis and Richards, LeCavalier, and all the gang. You win a cup and you kind of hang around. And then you fall back and you get Stamkos and Hedman, and the next wave moves in. And you go to another Stanley Cup final, and you look like you're maybe poised to return to some sort of form and be a contender, and you can't get back there. And you just keep making trades, drafting guys, trying to make the fits on your team that you have to, and then boom. And all of a sudden, granted, it's COVID time, doesn't matter. Those series were played. Everybody, there's no asterisks. Those cups count every bit as much as the ones in any other year. And Tampa does what they do, and now Florida has done what they've done. So kudos to both of those organizations for their runs. And right now we're enjoying Florida's. And you just said it. I don't think it's over, buddy.
No, it most certainly is not. No. Now, I want to also ask you, now you've also done some writing as well. You're an author as well. And what was it like, writing books or writing a book and even actually spending time around some of these former players like Doug Gilmour and...
Yeah, well, writing books is a different animal altogether. I say all the time that I think everybody has a book in them, and it depending obviously of your age. But if you've achieved any longevity in life, it doesn't even have to be longevity per se in terms of 60, 70, or 80 years, but if you've had a passion and you've chewed some of the dirt chronologically, you probably could sit down, put pen to paper or finger to keypad, and blast out a few pages, maybe a couple chapters, and maybe even form the basis of a manuscript on anything. In my case, my love of the history and the stats and the trivia, it's been 95% of my life has revolved around hockey trivia and hockey history and hockey statistics. So I first had the thoughts of a book going as far back as the early 80s. In fact, I have notes probably in a box somewhere of some stuff that I wrote down, but I still never got around to actually writing one in 93, 94 and releasing it then, my first one. So, and to be honest with you, it's, if I had to equate it, I would say it's basically at about a grade 4 level. It really, I was so honored to see my name on a book. I remember getting the first box from the publisher and ripping it open, and it was one of the proudest moments of my life. And I raced over to my friend Kevin Jardine's house. He'd only been married for a few years at the time, and I raced over to their home and banged on the door. It was like just after supper on a Monday or Tuesday night, and I had my book in hand. I was pretty proud to show him. We kind of grew up together. So yeah, it's amazing. My second one and third one, my second one was really the big effort. The third one was mostly regurgitation. The publishing house came to me and said, I want you to do another one. And I said, I can't, man. The other one was just, not that long ago. And they said, no, do it. Just update it. Just do an update. And they pay you, they're going to pay you 5 figures. You know what, Ali, you're going to do it. So,
yeah.
But I didn't go on any tour or anything. They sent me down to Toronto when I did all the media out of Toronto. I just did, TV interviews and radio interviews basically over about a week span, going from studio in Toronto. Whereas in 2001, I got sent across Canada on a 22-day tour. That's 69 interviews in 22 days, coast to coast in Canada. It was everything paid for. It was quite something. Certainly something I'll never forget. And then my fourth book, I wrote a guy's life story. So I stepped away from the trivia, and I wrote the life story of Goldie Goldthorpe, the impetus for the character Ogie Oglethorpe in the movie Slapshot. I wrote his life story. So they've all been labor of loves, but everybody's got some writing in them, and I encourage people to do it. If you don't want to do it longhand with pen and paper. Everyone's got tablets and laptops and whatnot. Just sit down and jot a few things down, something you're passionate about, and write a few notes about it, and you'll be surprised at how quickly that might turn into a thought for a book. For you personally, you never know. For me, it was a lot of fun.
Absolutely. And what about in terms of who has been the most, like, is there any player that, or any alumni that you had that you interviewed, that one that you will always remember?
Well, quite a few for sure.
Go ahead.
I had a chance to sit down with Rocket Richard in 1989. It's one of the highlights of my life. Certainly, Yvon Cornway is my favorite player of all time, and I now call him and consider him a great friend. And I've obviously interviewed him and had many, many, many occasions to share a stage and a microphone with him. There's all sorts of other guys, Gretzky, Bobby Orr, Gordie Howe, and go down the line of the history of the game, all the greats, pretty much from the Bobby Hull era up. There's a few from way back in the day, a handful of them that I had a chance to talk to as well, like a Roel Joliet and Bill Cowley and like names from superstars, Hall of Famers from way back. There's a number of those as well. But if there's one interview that stands out for me, out of the hundreds and hundreds that I've done, it would be with Peter Stastny. And I interviewed him about 20 years ago. The internet had only been going for a few years. This was an online interview that we taped. He had come into Ottawa, and he was done playing, but he had come into Ottawa for an event, and I got a chance to sit down with him, and we talked about his career. And I didn't really expect the interview to go the way that it went. We just automatically got back to him playing against Team Canada 72. After Team Canada finished against Russia in 72, they had one more game to play. They played the Czechoslovakia national team, who were actually the world champions that year, not Russia. And Stastny was in that game. Peter, Anton, Marion, there was another one too, no relation. I think there was 4 of them in that game. Maybe Anton didn't play, but Peter and Marion did. And they were scouted then, and that largely led to them coming to the NHL years later. But we got back in that era, and we started talking a little bit about the Soviets, and then about 1968 and the invasion and what happened and everything. And he told me that when the Czechs beat the Russians in 68, he was a little boy at home in what is now Slovakia, but was then Czechoslovakia. And he went outside to celebrate, right? Because they had Russian military were on their streets. And he's telling me this story. He leads up to it. He builds up to it. And I can see his teeth are starting to clench, and the veins in his neck are starting to come out. And he's telling me about his parents and his family. And he went outside to celebrate with them. And the Russian soldier came over and hit him in the head with the butt of his gun. Like almost cracked his skull right open. Said he never felt pain like that. And went after his family and everything else, threatened to shoot them because they were celebrating because they beat the Russians. And I didn't know if he was going to come to tears or if he was going to start swinging. Like, it was the emotion that came out of that man is something that all these years later, Ali, I will say I've never experienced with anybody else I've ever talked to. So when I get asked about the greatest interviews, I can give you a lot of really big names that I've had the pleasure to work with and sit down with, but there's never been an interview that struck me like the one I did with Peter Stastny.
Yeah, you know what? It must have. You know what? I could have just imagined it. It would have been a very emotional one, probably, to do as well.
Yeah, it was. He, like I said, I wasn't prepared for that to go that route, and yet I saw the buildup. Fortunately, I was right beside him. Had it been over a camera or a phone line, a radio interview like we hear millions of times, something like that, I don't know that it would have had, well, for sure it would not have had the same impact on me. But being right beside him, put it this way, I'm telling you this story, and it's over 20 years ago, that interview. So there you go.
Yeah, no, that's it. And what was it like? What about Doug Gilmour? What was it like interviewing him?
Well, I met Doug for the first time when he was still playing, and he was, when I started doing some work at the Sens games, and I had a press pass, and I would be down after the game, and I was one of the many guys that would either scrum the players and whatnot. And if you went in the morning on a game day skate, you could put a request in, and I was no different. I would put a request in. Sometimes you'd get them, sometimes you wouldn't. And eventually, before Doug got traded away from Toronto in 97, I got a chance to meet him and interview him one-on-one at that time. So I've known him since then, but in the last 8 years, we've become pretty good friends. And in fact, the guy I just told you about, Goldie Goldthorpe, who I wrote my 4th book about, Goldie played with and against Doug's older brother, Dave Gilmour, in the minors in the 70s. So we have a mutual connection there. And when Goldie and I Goldie was doing a promotion in Kingston before I got the contract for the book with him. And we were in Kingston, and Doug came out with us that night, and it just really cemented sort of my friendship with him. And like I was just telling you before you started the interview, I was just in Prince Edward Island I was there for a week, but I was working for 4 days, and Doug Gilmour, Wendell Clark, and Daryl Sittler were there for the first 2.5 days of that, and I got a chance to have all three of them up on stage and do a hot stove, the old Hockey Night in Canada term for a on-stage Q&A, and Doug was up there and part of it, and that's got to be probably the 30th or 40th time at least that I've interviewed him in some capacity. But he's a great character. He's a hell of a player, Hall of Famer, Stanley Cup winner, Canada Cup winner, Leaf record for points in a season, broke Sittler's. I mean, all the rest of it, you got nothing but great things to say about Doug Gilmour.
Yeah, you know what? I think, you know what? I feel he'd be a good interview, too.
Oh, yeah, for sure, Ali. He's a good interview. There's lots of ammo there. I mean, the guy won a Memorial Cup in Cornwall, so even, he's drafted 6th round. Like, guys drafted in 6th round at 155 pounds or whatever he weighed. They're not supposed to make it in the 1980s, and he did. So there's lots and lots of ammo statistically or historically or anecdotally and hockey related with Doug Gilmour if you ever get a chance.
Yeah, shout out to you, Doug. If you're listening, feel free to reach out.
There you go.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll, yeah. And, something, though, what I really find unique here is that all the stories that kind of come and get passed on from, when we go back in from, it's just, you know what? It's always that lifelong learning that I've always been a fan of, especially when it comes to the NHL and, being able to hear your perspective as an author. It's always just amazing to kind of hear how things started. Yeah.
Everybody's got a backstory, right? Whether it be players, you'd have your own, Ali. I've got my own. Everybody that's had a chance to talk about this great game going back since the media first became a thing. There were reporters back in the day when the Stanley Cup was first awarded in 1890s, and once radio got going and Foster Hewitt got going and all the rest, all the way through, right, over 100 years worth, and now the proliferation of what's available now is absolutely mind blowing. But at the same time, it's a great game to follow and great game to watch and great game to be a part of if that's your passion, and it's been mine for my whole life. My number one passion my entire life is the sport of hockey, by far, bar none. There's nothing close to it, and it's driven my life as a young boy, and it continues to do so in my back 9 years here of adulthood. It still is the number one thing in my life is in and around hockey, certainly professionally, that's for sure.
Yeah, no, I enjoy the NHL. I really do.
Yeah, that's great, pal. I mean, I know you do some other things, but if you're a podcaster and you're gonna talk some NHL, it'd probably be a lot easier if you're a fan of the sport.
Yeah, and I think you can tell I'm a fan of the NHL.
Yeah, for sure. I'm assuming that's why you reached out.
Absolutely, yes. Now, you mentioned Foster Hewitt back there. I want to also now. I have to ask you. What do you now? Joe Bowen announced his retirement, that this season will be his last. What are your thoughts on him deciding to hang up the mic? He's had a remarkable career.
Who was that, Ali?
Joe Bowen.
Oh, Joe Bowen, yeah. Well, we got a long-standing broadcaster here in Ottawa that's announced it's his last season as well. Gord Wilson, the color commentator on radio, has done every Sens game since '92. He's announced this will be his last year. We have not heard what his longtime partner, play-by-play Dean Brown, is doing, but eventually there comes a time, right? It's especially with your voice. I can tell you, myself personally, I'm 66 years old, and I just did 4 days worth of gigs, and my voice is strained. It may not sound it right now, but I can tell you that it is strained from working those 4 days. And if you turn the clock back even 5 years, that would not have been a problem. But I'm closer to 70 than I am to 60. So Joe Bowen's up there too, and eventually every dog has their day. Bob Cole stayed on probably too long. Don Cherry, that's a whole other story. But the guys who worked into their 80s, I don't know, man. That's I tip my hat to them, but I don't know that's for everybody. So Joe's decided to call it a day, and he'll leave a great legacy when he does hang him up. Him and Jim Ralph will have left a great legacy for Leaf fans on the radio broadcasts.
Yes, most certainly. They've been, you know what, they've been my favorites over the years. And I certainly, and I think it'll be interesting to see what Jim Ralph ends up doing.
Yeah, because this whole Leaf broadcast thing, the last 3-4 years, from a radio point of view, has been comical. There's been instances where they haven't even sent them on the road, and they're broadcasting from a monitor.
Yep.
That's a disgrace and a joke. Then you've got the fact that Ralphie's been basically given his walking papers like 3 times, and then miraculously, and probably with some public pressure, and maybe even from Joe himself, he's been brought back. I don't know why in God's name they would ever thought of moving him. He's like their radio version of Danny Gallivan and Dick Irvin from back in the day, right? There's duos that just work. Fred Cusick and Derek Sanderson in Boston were together forever. There's just duos that work, and Joe Bowen and Jimmy Ralph work, and Joe's calling it a day. I bet you, I don't know this for a fact, but I do know him very well. But I bet you that part of it is that he's sick of the Mickey Mouse treatment as well. Let's be honest. That's what it's been a little bit. Not all of it. He's had a great career and a great run. But not sending him and Jim on the road has got to be one of the biggest farcical things I know in the game of hockey.
But certainly he's certainly been a professional throughout the whole thing, because pretty much for all the road games, they've been doing it from the studio.
Yeah, I don't even know the schedule is how many they've done or not. I know this is a relatively new thing. Yeah, he never went on the air and cried about it. Everybody else did it for him. He didn't have to. Like once that got out, that they weren't traveling. By the way, they're not the only team. There's a couple others doing.
No, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is a multi-billion-dollar industry. If you go to get a new franchise right now, it's going to cost you minimally $1 billion. And this is one of the most significant parts of your broadcast team, your radio broadcast. And you don't have an extra $250,000, $300,000 to ensure that they can get to all 41 road games, not including playoffs. And they're paid a decent salary. And it's mystifying to me, but I don't write those checks and don't know those dollars, but it's mystifying to me. But Joe's a good guy, great broadcaster. He'll have a great legacy when he goes, Ali, and I'll be happy for him.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And you know what? And I actually, honestly, this did come up earlier at one point in past shows that I thought, my prediction was that both of them, Joe and Jim, would be around for at least but at the most 5 years. But it turns out it's going to be a little earlier than. It turns out it's going to be way earlier than that.
Yeah, Ali, I never really sat down and really thought how much longer a guy like Joe Bowen would go. He's a radio broadcaster. There's 32 of them in the NHL. He's one of them. And always wish him well. I know he's got a son named Liam, so that was always sort of a little thing between him and I. Anytime I'd see him, I'd say, "Hey, how's Liam doing?" And, sort of thing. It was kind of a funny thing, but never really gave much thought to at what point his career may or may not go, Ali. I don't think it's probably one of the more pressing issues in the game today. But like I said, I wish him well. And I'm sure he didn't make the decision lightly because of the length of his career. But at the end of the day, he'll have left a great legacy, him and Ralphie both. And Ralphie will figure something out, whether they keep him on or he calls it a day too. But they're a great duo, and one more year into the sunset.
Yes, and let's see how the Leafs do this year. It's going to be, I'm excited to find that out.
Yeah, I'll tell you exactly how they'll do, Ali. They're going to make the playoffs and lose in the first round.
Well, they made it to the second round this year.
Yeah, I know, because I saw the parade.
Well, let's see. I hope they go a little further than that. At least kind of win it all, but let's see.
Ali, not a hope in hell. But listen, it's the thing about Leaf fans is their motto, of course, which probably ingrained in you from the time you were in diapers, is wait till next year. That's what being a Leaf fan is all about. And then crying about everything under the sun for 48 hours and then worrying about the traffic on the Don Valley Parkway.
There we go. Well, Liam, this was just so much fun. They can find you on X at Liam_hockey.
They sure can. Absolutely, Ali. Thank you for that. Absolutely. Anybody can message me there, and I respond to every single message.
And you know what, Liam? And let's do this. And I hope. And let's do this again real soon. I hope we can do this again real soon too.
Absolutely, buddy. Reach out anytime. I enjoyed talking to you.
Sounds good. Stay tuned to the Broadcast Map Network.
Thank you so much for listening and or watching Broadcast Map. To learn more about the show, please visit broadcastmap.ca. While you're there, subscribe to the newsletter so you never miss an update. Besides, it's free. Enter your email address and hit subscribe right on the homepage and at the bottom of all Broadcast Map posts.